The More Movement Crew.
Welcome to the More Movement Crew podcast. I am your host, Kenina Porter, and this is episode 12. So welcome back. I am glad to be back. I took a week off without doing a podcast because I just needed to reset and refresh. And last episode was a great episode. I got to spend some time with my dad, and we talked about health, which is a topic that is becoming increasingly important, particularly to me and my health and just those in my family. So if you tuned into that episode, thank you. And if you haven't tuned in, make sure you check it out because he just gives a good perspective on someone who is older that has kind of maintained a healthy lifestyle throughout most of his life. So that was a really great episode, and it was just an honor to be on a in a space with my dad and having that conversation and him being a guest. He's always been a fan since day one and one of my biggest supporters. And so it was good to bring him on the show and talk to him about, health and things like that. So if you checked it out, I appreciate it and he appreciated it. So we are on episode 12 of season 2, and I'm grateful to God because I am even at a season 2, and I feel like I've grown through this journey, and I put out a lot of dope content. So for those who have been rocking with me, thank you so much for continuing to rock with me. And for those who are new, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And so today, I'm sure you've seen the title of this episode is Confessions of a Perfectionist. And so it's something that I have struggled with for a long time, and it's just something that I figure I needed to kind of talk about, right? Because there are other people like me that struggle with that. And so I am reading a book called To Create. And this book just talks to creatives and those who are wanting to be entrepreneurs and who are already entrepreneurs about what it means to create, what it means to build companies and to make things and to serve others, and just moving in that space where you're creative and you're constantly thinking up ideas and ways to help people. And so Call to Create is one of the best books I think I've read thus far. It is so profound. It has just kind of enlightened me on how I see myself as an entrepreneur and as a creator, and how I recognize that God has given me the ability to do these things purely because he's good, right? And because God was the first entrepreneur. So he's given us the blueprint as to how to create things to serve people. And so that book, it was totally a blessing to my life. But there was a chapter in it that talked about failure. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And this podcast is going to be really transparent because, to be honest, I don't know any other way to be. Like, I'm just a transparent person, and I just kind of tell my story and my truth however it is. And so, my struggle, like I said, has always been with perfectionism and wanting to make sure that I did it right. I think growing up as a child, I was always one of those kids that wanted to do things the way that they were supposed to be done, in terms of like obeying the rules and not getting in trouble and not being disrespectful. So I always wanted to kind of stay the course, and I stayed in line, right? And so I was never the kid that wanted to like rebel, stay out late, just like do drugs, like any of that stuff. I just didn't do it, right? I didn't do it, and it could have been fear. My parents didn't play. At the end of the day, they're sweet parents, they're great parents. But they didn't play. So, my dad, he was in the military, so he would have got me together. My mom, she would have got me together. And I just really respected my parents that way. And I kind of respected that, their reputation, right? I wanted to make sure that I didn't like shame them for some of the things that I did. So that was just kind of how I was. I just didn't want to get in any trouble. And I think that because I was that way, I started to program in my mind that things had to be done by the book, right? And not just by the book, but exactly like the book. And that is such a horrible way to program yourself, because it was self-programmed, right? It was something that I had put in my mind, that if I do things the right way, I will always get the right outcome, right? If I do things the way that I'm supposed to, if I look this way, if I talk this way, if I, don't say this or don't do this, then these things will happen. And so I think that was detrimental to my development, thinking that way, because I was afraid to fail. And so, thinking about that and thinking about how um, I grew up thinking that like I had to get things right, kept me from experiencing life and kept me from kind of moving outside of my comfort zone. And so I think that that was something that I kind of regret to this day. Also, it kind of um, also allowed me to see and to learn from other people's mistakes. I think that was the part that I did learn that was positive about it, is that I saw the way that people did things and I saw the outcome. So very early on, I was a very I had a very perceptive student and child. And I always looked at people's lives and I always watched them and saw how they did things and saw how they carried themselves. And then I looked at what the Bible calls fruit, right? I looked at like what their life looked like, what their health looked like, what their children acted like. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is what they did to get this. So this is what I'll do to get this, or I'll do the opposite to get this. And so I kind of shaped my life on looking at abiding by the rules and looking at the actions and behaviors of others, and not necessarily digging deep and finding out who I am and who I was and what I liked, and kind of just trying things, kind of taking that risk. So that is really how the perfectionism started, right? It just started that way. And then it gave me the ability, or what I thought was the ability, to control the outcome, right? And so and I think I've shared this before, most of the things that I consider weaknesses are things around control, not being able to control how I'm perceived, what people say and do, and all these things kind of make me nervous. Even in relationships, it's this idea of not being able to control how the person deals with your baggage, how the person deals with your inadequacies, your imperfections, and you not knowing if they're gonna like just roll on you and just not be in the relationship anymore, or are they going to stay and like ride it out. And so I think that a lot of my weaknesses come from that. And so, being transparent, that is what, developed this struggle for perfectionism. But the interesting part is that like I was never a perfectionist when it came to education, which is crazy. God does things so strategically. It's like it's funny that I would be in the field of education right now at this point in my life, and I didn't. Education was the only thing that I didn't want to be perfect about, because I really thought like education, getting a high school education is just what I needed to do to get to the next step, and that was to get a job and make money and live on my own and be in control. So it's funny that now I'm in education and it's something I'm so passionate about. But so early on, I struggled with that, and then, as I got older, I began to grow, and I'm so grateful because, you know, speaking as a Black woman, an educated Black woman, um the growth period that I needed between like that my 20s, like late 20s, early 30s, was critical to shaping the woman that I am today. I have grown tremendously and I see things differently. I see things way different than I did when I was in my 20s. I used to rush through everything. I tried to get things done super quickly. I didn't stop to to think about the details of things, sometimes when it came to getting things done. And so I became a person that rushed through life as well and just kind of rushed through things. And so that showed up, I think. And I remember working a job, and I was just trying to get some work done because, I was one of those, like, I want to be known as a person who gets this done and this done and this done. And so I was rushing to do these tutorials. And it was like, you had to put graphics and images next to the instructions, and they were like tutorials that you could print out. And so I was rushing to get these tutorials done, and I kept on submitting them. And then the person that reviewed them was like, it's still not right. And so then I go back and hurry up and rush to finish it. And then she was like, it's still not right. And then I fixed it again. And she was like, you're rushing to get this done. It's still not right. And so I concentrated, I focused, and I spent a lot of time editing it. And I remember, okay, maybe, finally she thinks it's okay. And then I come in the next day, and the stack that I gave her of the tutorial that I finished was still sitting on the desk, and she didn't use them. So I'm guessing she saw something else was wrong with them. And so that in itself, that learning experience helped me to realize that I did need to slow down, and I did need to stop trying to accomplish so much and really just focus on doing things well, which is a whole word. As a whole word in itself, is just slowing down and doing things well. So I think that at the prime age, I guess you could say at 37, I've learned that. I've learned to slow down. And, being diagnosed with lupus forced me, to be honest. It set me down to where I got to think about that. I got to think about how I struggled with perfectionism, how I am constantly trying to gain control of things. And, God ultimately is in charge, right? He is perfect, and we are not. And so using God's example as the model is what we need to do when we do work, when we create, is using God as that model. And that, we are not perfect, and we're not going to be able to do everything perfect, right? We just have to rely on God to provide us insight and wisdom as to how to approach this thing. So I'm a new entrepreneur, and I've been a new entrepreneur for some time, and I'm still learning, I'm still growing. And there's a lot of things that I don't know. And to be honest, I'll be really transparent again, is that the whole entrepreneur financial side of it is not really what I'm excited about. The monetary, the money is not what I'm excited about. It's just creating. It's just helping people. It's all that I really want to do. So in my ideal dream company, I would have somebody to take care of all the stuff that I really am not too excited about doing, and give me the freedom to create is really what I want to do. And I know that one day I will be in that place where I can just do that. And so, speaking to being an entrepreneur and being a new entrepreneur, right now we're just kind of in a time where in the middle of this pandemic, people are tapping into their creative side, and people are coming up with companies and businesses and all types of ventures to make money and to use their talents. And so it's booming with ideas right now, and I think that that's a great thing. But I also think that there's one thing that many people don't talk about when it comes to being an entrepreneur, when it comes to being a creative. And I think this is so critical, and the book talked about this, which is failure, right? And that we oftentimes don't talk about our failures. And especially as believers do not talk about their inadequacies and their failures, right? I can say we want you to think that, or people to know that everything is okay, but it's almost in a sense as though we want people to believe that everything is always okay. And so I think that is really detrimental to the gospel message, and to, what we believe is that failure is a part of it, right? Failure just reminds us that we are not perfect. And so to fail, you have to fail in order to learn from that and to grow from that. And so we don't express enough how we failed and how God has brought us through that and allowed us to do that. I started KP Media in like 2007. and I was helping edit projects and building websites. And this was from scratch. This was during like when Dreamweaver was like hot, like Dreamweaver 4, like back in the day. And when like Adobe Flash was really, really popular. And so I was, designing websites from like the programming standpoint, like when HTML, um, with designing it through Dreamweaver with HTML is how I was doing it. And so I had established this company and I was working full time. And I just really established it because I was doing so much free stuff. Like as creatives, I know that if you're listening, you've experienced times where people always want you to do something for free, like, and it's frustrating and you get tired of being used and you get tired of all the hours that you put in never getting paid for it and never getting what you're worth. So um I just got tired of that and I was like, I'm going to start my company. And somebody helped me to start a LLC, and I had my name and I had my logo. And then I was not able to fulfill it. It was something that I really felt like I hadn't thought through. I didn't have the capacity to do that job and do another job. And I think I was starting my graduate program at the same time. And so school took precedence over the company. And so I just took a pause and I closed the business and didn't think to reopen it. And so now I've written the book. And so now the the call, I'll have to say call, to be an entrepreneur is back. And it's the necessary step that I need to take in order to grow this movement, right? The More Movement Crew and all of the ideas and the media content that I want to create through my company. And so, the book just kind of pushed me out there to go ahead and establish things and set things up. And so now I'm working to rebrand and to figure out exactly what that looks like in terms of services that I provide and the ministry that I'm called to do, and to dig into like all of the passions that I have and put them all together for one in one space, right? To support people in all the ways that I know how. And so I'm excited about that rebrand, but it's taken time to get there. I say all that to say it's taken time for me to really understand who I am, for me to recognize that I'm not perfect, and for me to really think and plan out and pray about what it is that I'm supposed to do. And so, failure is it's such a learning experience, so much so that it just allows you to just recognize that God is in control. And I say that and it sounds so cliche, but whether I fail or succeed, God is still good, right? And whether I make all this money and people love what I produce, God is still good, right? And no matter what, I'm okay, right? The world is not going to end if things don't turn out the way that I thought that they would. And so, God is really just kind of humbling me on that. When someone purchases a book, to this day, I write a note to them. I thank them for purchasing the book because I appreciate it. I appreciate them investing in me and my story. And so failure is something that is inevitable. And when you see it from that perspective, that no matter what, you're good because God is good, then you're not afraid to step out and to do things. You're not afraid to fail because it's like, oh, yeah, I did that. It failed. But through this, I learned this, and God is good. That's what we don't hear. Those are the stories we don't hear. And the book that I've been reading talks about all of the companies that made it to Silicon Valley and never lived. They all died there. All the ideas, all the things that they only illustrate and talk about the success stories of the companies that did make it and that are still successful today, but they never talk about the companies that failed and why they failed. And so I think us being transparent about failure is so, so important, not only for ourselves, but for as believers before the gospel message that you can fail and you still be okay, right? You can fail and you can learn from it and you can come back and you can kill it. So I think that is so important to note during this podcast, is that failure is okay. It's completely okay. And you don't got to be perfect. And so I'm going to end just with this last saying that I always use when I struggle with perfection. And that is, I don't strive to be perfect. I just strive to work and to move in excellence, because perfection is only something that God is, right? And excellence is when I do my best for God's glory. And so we don't strive to be perfect, right? Because we are not perfect. And I think that that's what makes us unique. That's what makes us beautiful. But we need to strive for excellence in the work that we do and what we produce and the quality that we put out. So, if you're listening to this and you're an entrepreneur, strive for excellence in the work that you do, whether it's a small company, whether you're working out of your home. Strive for excellence. Try to make your product the best that it can be, providing the best quality for people, because that is what God honors, right? God honors that. And He doesn't really care so much about how much revenue you make, right? And how popular you are and how many likes you have on Instagram and how many followers, but more so that you have given your gift to create to Him, and you've allowed Him to get the glory from what you create. And so that when you have that combination, there's nothing that you can't create, right? There's nothing that you can't do. And so I hope that me sharing this has blessed you this week. I pray that you're safe during this pandemic and you're not like losing your minds, or not losing your minds, but just running out of ideas and things to do, because I feel you if you're just like, okay, I need to find some more stuff to do, because in these last couple of weeks, I have learned to plant a garden. I have cooked things I've never cooked before. I started baking. I've just tried so many things. I read, like, I'm on my second book, bought a third, so I'm getting ready to go into this third book that I'm excited about. I'm starting to record an audio book, which is taking some time, but it's gonna get done. And I'm just doing a lot more. I have a vision board, not a vision board, but more like a work board, where every day I list the projects and activities that I'm working on, just to see if I'm like accomplishing things, if I'm being productive. But also like looking at that board and saying, okay, if today is just not really a good day, I don't necessarily have to do everything on that board every day. So just trying to have a balance. But I think that these times produce creativity that comes from out of whatever's inside of you. So continue to create, continue to do the work that we're called to do, and help people and to change lives. So I pray that you were blessed by this podcast. I look forward to having another episode as we close this season. We're going to do 15 episodes to close out this season, and so as we close out the season, we're going to just bring you some interesting things, and then we'll probably take a break at some point and get ready for this rebrand. And I'm so excited about the progress that we're making with the brand. And so I pray that this has blessed you, and I want you to continue to be blessed. And until next time, we'll see you again.